How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying, let's see, alright. Today we're studying Daf Nun Gimel, Daf 53 of Masechta BavaKama. Friends, I got my coffee here, so you know what that means. It's the morning, and I got my coffee over here, got my BavaKama. I got my friends at Babylon Talmud. I'm in a groove right now with Patrick, Tears, and Grace. Got all the things I need. And, alright. Here we go. Alright. Here we go. Alright. So we're going to start in Daf Nun Beis and Beis at the last line of the Daf. Nafal fun of Chulei Uah. So this is talking about a scenario where there's a pit, okay? There's a pit. Somebody dug a pit. There's a bor b'shus harabim, and a Ruvain dug a pit, okay? Now, Ruvain now hires a worker to do some stuff in the pit. I don't know, whatever it is, but the worker's not building the pit. The pit's already there, okay? Ruvain built a pit. He was irresponsible. He built a pit. Shimon is now doing some work in the pit. Shimon takes out his jackhammer. I think maybe they call it like a kangol or something like that. A kangol? I don't know. He takes out his jackhammer. He starts jackhammering. And then there's an ox. And the ox is outside of the pit. And he goes, "What? Jackhammering? Oh no!" And he gets all startled and he falls in the pit. I don't know, maybe on the jackhammer, but that's not part of the equation over here. He falls in the pit. Coffee. I made sure to make coffee so that, because it takes time for my gears to get going in my brain. Even though my brain works, it totally works. I already learned the Daf of Gemara today. It works, but I guess if I have to maybe it's not creative yet. So having to explain things and be free and open, it's not there maybe. But I have coffee. Coffee helps, So whenever I need to, I'll just take a sip until it runs out. Alright, so that's the scenario, okay? Jackhammer guy, jackhammer boy is jackhammering in the pit. Ox boy gets all startled and falls in the pit. So now the Mishnah had said it, there's a difference between if it falls forward or falls backwards. If it falls forward, so then chayiv, the question is who's chayiv? And if it falls backwards, so then potter. Okay, so now, says the Gemara, Amar Rab, says Rab, lifanav mamish, acharav mamish. Okay, so Rab says, right, let's go back to v'zev baber, right, and both of them are in the pit. So meaning, according to Rab, when the Mishnah talks about the cow falling forward, the cow falling backwards, so we're talking about falling forwards into the pit or falling backwards into the pit. Meaning, is the cow falling on its face in the pit, or is the cow falling on its caboose in the pit? So, and what the Mishnah says according to Rab is that if the cow falls face first into the pit, so then whoever's chayiv is going to be chayiv. The Gemara is going to explain who that is. All right, I'll just tell you. It's the one who owns the pit is going to be chayiv. We'll discuss why and not the jackhammer, whatever it is. We're going to see. It's a whole discussion on today's daf. But it says Rab that when the cow falls face first into the pit, so then the owner of the pit is going to be chayiv for the cow. If the cow falls, if the cow falls caboose first into the pit, so then the owner of the pit is potter. Rav the Taime, and Rav is consistent with his svara, with his reasoning, which is Damarav bor shechiva olav teire lehavlo velo lechabato. That says Rav that what the owner of the pit is chayiv for in the pit is for the foul air, for the modnodike environment in the pit. And therefore, when the cow falls face first, it's getting a whiff of the modnodike air, and that whiff is what's getting him. But if he falls first with his caboose, so then he's not really getting that same shmek, and therefore Wait, shmek, shmef, shmek, shmek, shmek. Smells a shmek. Sounds funny. Shmek. Why not? So he doesn't get that same shmek if he falls first from his caboose. So that's why he's potter. Okay, let's start from the beginning. From the beginning of the daf. Amar Rav says, Rav, the fun of mamish, lacharav of mamish. That when we say that the owner of the pit is chayiv, when the cow falls face first, it means mamish face first into the pit, versus if it falls caboose first into the pit. And both we're talking about in both scenarios, whether it's face first or caboose first into the pit. Rav l'taime, and Rav is consistent with his mahalach, with his reasoning, which is the Amar Rav says, Rav bor shechiva olav teire lehavlo v'lo lechabato. That what you're chayiv for, what the owner of the pit is chayiv for, is for the environment in the pit with the bad air, as opposed to the bump that is caused. And therefore, when the cow falls face first, it gets a starke shmek of the modna air, and therefore is chayiv for that. But if it falls first with the caboose, it's not the same shmek, and therefore he's going to be potter. But there's nothing to do with the bump. Shmuel says, "Babor bein milafonov bein milacharav chayiv," whereas Shmuel disagrees and says, "No, if the cow is falling into the pit, then the cow is going to have a bump. And regardless of if the cow bumps at the bottom of the pit with his face first or with his caboose first, it makes no difference. It's going to be chayiv." Shmuel is consistent with his reasoning. The Amar that he says, "Lahavlo v'chol shekin lechabato," that sure, you're chayiv in a pit for the modne environment, but you're also chayiv for the bump. And therefore, regardless of if the cow falls face first or caboose first, it makes no difference if it gets a bump, which inevitably it will when it hits the bottom, and gets damaged or dies. So then it's going to be a problem for the owner of the pit. But then Shmuel, what's the scenario in the Mishnah where it says that if the ox or cow, I've been saying cow, but I don't think it matters. If the cow falls backwards from the jackhammering, so then he's potter. Shmuel, it sounds like you're saying that he's always going to be chayiv because it's going to have a land with a bump. Kigon deniskol bebor v'nafala achare habor chutz labor. Shmuel says where he's potter is if the ox, I'm just going to use ox and cow interchangeably, is that okay? That if the ox gets to the pit and gets all startled from the jackhammer but does not fall into the pit, it falls outside of the pit and just, kind of stumbles on the ground outside of the pit, so then the owner of the pit is going to be potter. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit more coffee. I'm running low on coffee. Alright, it's probably better this way. I don't want a humongous cup of coffee. This is my second one. What time is it? It's pretty early, 5 in the morning. Alright, let's go weiter. Meisve. It says Eisve. There's a different case that says Meisve. I think it makes more sense because otherwise who's asking the kasha? Meisve, we have a kasha. Bibor, bein lefanov, bein la'acharov, chayav, ho, ho, ho. That says the Braise that if we're talking about a cow falling into the pit, then it will always be, the owner of the pit is going to be chayav, regardless of if the cow falls face first or caboose first, tiyuvta di Rav, which therefore is the kasha on Rav, because Rav says only face first would the owner of the pit be chayav, but caboose first he would be potter. But we seem to be having a brisa which says that regardless if he falls on his face or his caboose, the balabor is going to be chayav. Sounds like Shmuel, who says that the bump is important. And if he falls and gets a bump, so the balabor is chayiv. Omer of Chizda says, so we're going to have 3 answers, I believe. Omer of Chizda says, of Chizda mode Rav bibor bershuso de chayiv. So says Rav Chizda, well, even Rav would admit that if this was not a bor b'rshus harabim, rather it was a bor b'rshus hayochid that we learned about the other day. So, if if the Baal Bor, the owner of the pit, had dug the pit in his own property, then he was mafkir his property, but he was not mafkir his pit, so the pit still belongs to him. So the pit still, one second. Okay. So, sorry, I got distracted by something. So the owner of the pit dug the pit in his property. He was mafkir his property, but he still owns the pit. And then this ox falls into the pit. So in that case, Rav would agree that regardless of if the ox fell on his face or on his caboose, the owner of the pit would be chayiv, mishum da'amarle, because the owner of the ox says to the owner of the pit, mimon avshoch. Either way you look at it, if my ox died because of the shmek, havlo didachu, right? If it fell face first and got a starke shmek of the modna air, so then that's your fault, Mr. Pit Man, Mr. Pit Boy. I feel like I prefer boy than man, Mr. Pit Boy. Bichaboto miss, if it died, and if you say it died from the bump, well, chaboto didachu, it's your bump, it's your pit, it's your everything. So therefore, the owner of the ox says, look, my ox died in your pit. I don't care how it died, it's your responsibility. So in that case, even Rav would say that regardless if it fell face first or caboose first, the owner of the pit is going to be chayiv. Rabba Amar, says Rabba, here what are we talking about? B'mishapich. So says Rabba that we're talking about a scenario, meaning, so Rabba says it's not necessarily limited to where the pit is in the rishus of the balabor. It can even be a bor b'rshus harabim. Now, when the Brisa says that the balabor is chayiv, regardless of if the ox falls face first or caboose first, well, actually, so if it falls face first, okay, so it's getting a shmek of the modna air, and therefore the balabor is going to be chayiv. Now, when we say if it falls caboose first, there's more to the story. It actually fell face first. You listen to this, it's like a gymnastic ox. It's falling face first, and then while it's falling face first, it then turns itself around to its caboose, boom, and the caboose then hits. But initially when it fell into the pit, it got a shmek of the modna air, and that's what did it in, and that's why the Brisa is saying that it's chayiv, even when it fell caboose first, because it really fell face first, and then only afterwards flipped around to its caboose. And that's why the balabor is chayiv. So again, so Rabbi Omar Ochav Ma'iskin, here we're talking about mishapich, that the ox flipped itself around mid-fall. Dinofal ha'ape, that it initially fell face first, v'ishapich, and then flipped around to its caboose, v'nofal agabe, and then fell on the caboose, de havlo de ahani bay, but still it's too late because the initial shmek did it in, and therefore the balabor is going to be chayiv. Rav Yosef Amar, says Rav Yosef, hocha benizkei bor b'shor askinon. Here the reason why. So Rav Yosef explains the brisa where it says that regardless of if the ox fell face first or caboose first, the owner of the pit is chayiv. It's because we're talking about a scenario where the ox fell into the pit and there was water in the pit and the ox was dirty and it ruined the water in the pit instantly. And in that case, it's regardless of if the ox falls face first or caboose first, the owner is going to. So, wait, what? Yeah. So the owner, So the owner of the ox is going to be chayiv, not the owner of the pit. The owner of the ox is going to be chayiv, right? Wait, let me just confirm. Yeah, exactly. That right. That according to Rav Yosef, it's fakert. We're not talking about the ox getting damaged in the pit. It's fakert. We're talking about the water in like a well that's getting ruined by an ox that falls into it. And and regardless of if the ox falls face first or caboose first, if he ruins the water, so then the owner of the ox is going to be chayiv for ruining the well. So again, so Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef, hacha b'nizke bor b'shor askinan. And here we're not talking about an ox getting damaged by a pit. We're talking about a pit getting ruined by an ox. My new, what's it talking about? Shehivish es meimav, that the ox ruined the water in the pit. Deloshna lifanov veloshna la'achariv, that regardless if the ox fell face first or caboose first, mechayiv, the owner of the ox is going to be chayiv for ruining the water in the well. Tani Rav Chananya teaches the sayue, the Rav, to support Rav. Vinafol, that the ox falls, yipol derech nefila, that it needs to fall face first, it needs to fall into the pit. Mikan amru, from here they said, nafal of mikol akriya, if the ox fell face first because of the drilling, chayav, so then the owner of the pit is chayav, la'acharav, but caboose first, mikol akriya, potter, vizavoza baber, and in both scenarios we are talking about falling into the pit, not like Shmuel, who says that the potter is outside of the pit. Alright, gewaldig. Alright, so now we get into a bit of the nitty gritty. Chevra, you ready for the nitty gritty? Omar, we said before, nafal lefanov mikol akriya chayav. Okay, so if the ox falls forward from the sound of the drilling, so then the owner of the pit is chayav. Ve'amai. Why? Okay, so let's assume for a second. So the question is who's chayav, right? I've been saying that the owner of the pit is chayav. So the question is who's chayav. So well, it's the person digging, right? The worker who's in the pit and he's drilling. So he's the one that's causing the ox to fall in. So maybe he should be chayiv. So affecting Gemara v'amai, but why should the driller be chayiv? Nemakore garam le. It's a grama, and we know that grama is potter ben nezaken, right? The driller did not, the worker did not, push the ox into the pit or whatever. The driller was drilling. This happened to have then startled a sensitive ox who then went stumbling into a pit. He didn't directly invoke the damage. He was merely doing something else which happened to have caused this ox to then get all startled, which then, a chain of events. But that's a grama, and he's potter. So Rav Shimi bar Ashi, Hamani Rib Nosini. Says Rav Shimi bar Ashi, well, the author of our Mishnah is Rib Nosin. The author of our Mishnah is Rib Nosin. The Omar who says, Baal Habor Hazeka Ka'avid. That Rib Nosin says that the Balabor, so the Balabor, the owner of the pit, is the one who's doing the damage. It's the one who owns the pit that's doing the damage. And so long as the owner of the ox will be unable to get his money from the worker, because the worker only caused the grama, didn't directly cause the damage, so he's going to go so the owner of the ox is going to go to the owner of the pit, and he's going to say, look, buddy, my ox is dead in your pit, pay up. Titania is learning by Sashor, shedochaf es chavero labor. So here you kind of have two things going on. You have Shor, you have Karen, and you also have Bor, right? One ox pushed another ox, which is Be'etzim a Tolada of Karen. One ox pushed another ox into a pit, and then the ox died in the pit. So you have Karen, and you have Bor. So again, the Tanya we learn in the Brayso, Shor shedochaf es chaver labor. An ox pushed another ox into a pit, and it's dead now. It's in Oxwood. Baal Ashor chayiv, Baal Labor potter. According to the Chachamim, the owner of the ox is going to be chayiv, the owner of the pit is not going to be chayiv. Okay. Reb Nosson Omer, whereas Reb Nosson says, Ba'al Ashor mishalim mechza, u'Ba'al Habor mishalim mechza. Whereas Reb Nosson says that they are each responsible for half. Reb Nosson says that the owner of the ox pays for half the damages, and for half the value of the ox, and the owner of the pit pays for the other half. But wait a second, we're learning a brayso. Reb Nosson says, Reb Nosson, Ba'al Habor mishalim gimel chalokim, u'Ba'al Ashor revia. We have a brayso where Reb Nosson says that the owner of the ox pays 25% of the killed ox, and the owner of the pit pays 75%. So on the one hand, Reb Nosson is saying that the Ba'al Ashor pays 50%. On the other hand, he's saying that he pays 25%. Well, on the one hand, Reb Nosson in one brayso is saying that they each pay 50%. On the other, in another brayso, Reb Nosson is saying that the Ba'al HaShor pays 25% and the Ba'al Habor pays 75%. What's the pshat? Lo kasha betam ha b'mud. So we say, well, no problem. 50-50 is when it's a shor mud. 75-25 is when it's a shor tam. Uvitam maika savar. Okay, so tell me more about this shor tam where it's 75-25. Ika savar hai kule azeka avad vai kule azeka avad. Well, if Reb Nosson's rationale is, look, the Ba'al HaShor, right, the shor that pushed, caused 100% of the damage, right? Kilu, regardless of if it ended up falling in a pit, the offending ox offended with enough force that it would have killed the ox, the victim ox. And at the same time, the pit was deep enough that an ox that would fall into that pit would die. And therefore, each sort of offending factor, each damaging factor was capable of contributing to 100% of the damage. And therefore, each one is chayiv 100%, but they split it between the two, 50-50. So now, if that's the case, hay mishalim palga, vay mishalim palga. Well, a shor tam, right? An ox that is a shor tam. So if it kills an ox, so even though it's responsible for all of what happened, he's still only chayiv for half of the damages. So in that scenario, if we're saying, in our scenario, if we're saying that the ox, did enough to have killed the other ox, and the pit did enough to have killed the other ox, well then the shor tam is going to be chayiv for 50% anyways. And we're saying that the Ba'al Habor then covers the other 50%, but why are we saying that the shor tam is only going to pay 25%? I mean, you should pay 50%. Kilu, regardless of if there was a borer there, what it did was enough to kill the other ox. And instead of paying nezek shalom, he pays chatzi nezek. So here also pay for half the damages. Why all of a sudden is it 25? But if you view it as though each one contributed to 50% of the damages, so the ox only damaged 50% of the victim ox, and the pit damaged the other 50%, so each one is responsible for 50%. But because it's a shor tam, the owner only is responsible for half of that, so 25%. So Ba'al Habor mishalim palga, okay, so the owner of the pit, of course, is going to pay for half of the dead cow, because, right, we're saying the pit contributed 50% of the damages, the ox contributed 50% of the damages, so the Ba'al Habor has to pay 50%. Now, the Ba'al HaShor, however, because it's a shor tam, u'Ba'al HaShor revia, the Ba'al HaShor is only going to pay 25%, which is, right, because we're saying Sachakol, it only contributed to half of the damages, and because it's a shor tam, it only has to pay half of that, so 25%. Ve'idach riva, and what about the remaining 25%? Mafsid, the victim, the owner of the victim ox, is going to lose that. So, meaning in this scenario, where we're saying that the bor and the shor each contribute half the damages, so the Ba'al Habor should pay 50%. The Ba'al HaShor, because it's a shor time, should contribute 75%. And the missing 25% But I don't know what I just said. The Balabor should pay 50%. The Balashor, because the Shortam should pay 25%, and the remaining 25%, nobody pays. The owner of the victim loses that. So either way, so Reb Nosson had given two scenarios. In one scenario, the Balabor and the Balashor each pay 50%. In the other scenario, the Balashor pays 25% and the Balhabor pays 75%. The question is, what would be the scenario in which you have this 75-25 breakdown? Because if we want to say that the 25% scenario is where's a short tam, but I don't understand. If you say that each basically contributed 100% of the damages, but they split it, so then it should be 50-50. If you're saying that each contributed to half of the damages, so then it should be 50 and 25, and the owner of the victim should lose 25. What's the scenario where it would be 25-75? So we give two possibilities. Omar Rav says, Rav Reb Nosson dayanehu v'nochis l'umka dedin. He says, look, Reb Nosson is a dayan. Reb Nosson is a judge. He looks into the depth of the matters. If he says 75-25, let's figure out why he said that. Le'olam kasovar haikule azeka avad v'haikule azeka avad. So really Reb Nosson figures, he holds, that each contributed to 100% of the death of the victim. Okay? Each contributed to 100% of the victim. So now if that's the case, we had said, well then logically, the Baal Hashor, who contributed to 100% of the death, it would have died anyways from what it did. So now because it's a short time, it has to pay Chatzi Nezek, which is 50%. And then the Baal Habor pays the other 50%. So why is it 25-75? It should be 50-50. Well, you ready for this? In a certain sense, if you think about it, the Baal Habor and the Baal Hashor are like partners in the damage, right? They both contributed to the damage. Or at least, even if we're saying each one did 100% of the damage, would have been enough for 100%, but they're now both two responsible parties. They both ended up in sort of the same boat where, this dead cow is dead and they were part of it. So now, in a sense, you can kind of view it as like, well then, if they're both kind of on the hook for what happened to this victim cow, then they should both kind of be contributing to the payments. Right? Like, if it's like, if you have two people that, right, I don't know, let's say there's a scenario where two people have to split $100, so they should each, so neither one's paying $100, the full $100, they each split it, they each pay half, right? Meaning each one, because they're two parties, they're each kind of like paying less because there are two people chipping in, right? So the interesting thing is, in this scenario, we're saying that if the shore and the boar each did enough damage to have killed the ox, so we're saying the Baal Hashor did enough for 100% of the damages, but because it's a short tam, it only has to pay 50%. And the Baal Habor is only paying 50%. So the interesting thing here is that, okay, the Baal Habor is benefiting from the partnership. Instead of paying for 100% of the damages, he only has to pay 50%. But the Baal Hashor is actually not benefiting from this, quote unquote partnership at all, because, right, the Baal Hashor, because either way, it's a short tam, so even if there was no boar there, he would not have to pay Nezek Shalom because it's a short time, he would pay Chatzi Nezek. And if we say that now he also pays Chatzi Nezek, so then he's not benefiting anything from this partnership. So rather, the owner of the shore says, look, Baal Habor, you're benefiting from this partnership, I'm not. We need to have a scenario where we're both benefiting from this partnership, and that scenario is going to be, I'm going to pay 25% of the damages, which is half of what I would have paid without you, and you're going to pay 75% of the damages, which is still 25% less than what you would have paid without me. And like this, they are both kind of benefiting from their partnership. So let's read that again. So le'olam kasover hai kulei avad v'hai kulei avad. So really, Reb Nosson holds is talking about a scenario where, is treating it as though the Baal Hashor, his ox, contributed to 100% of the damage of the victim, sure, and the Baal Habor, his pit contributed to 100% of the damages. And if you're going to say, well, if that's the case, well then the Balashor should pay Chatzi Nezek, which is half, and the Balabor should pay for the other half. But Mishum de Omar le Balashor le Balabor, but the owner of the ox says to the owner of the pit, Shutfusoi Maya Hanyali, this partnership has no benefits for me whatsoever, because I would have without you been paying for half the damages. Therefore, I'm going to pay 25% of the damages, and that way I'm paying half of what I would have paid otherwise, and you'll pay the other 75, which is still less than what you would have paid without me. Ibaisema, alternatively, la'olam, kasover, haipalga zeka avad, vaipalga zeka avad. Alternatively, Reb Nosson holds that each one is contributing to half of the damages. Okay, so the owner of the ox contributed to half of the damage that was done to the victim ox, and the owner of the pit contributed the other half. So therefore, I would say that the owner of the pit should pay 50%, the owner of the ox should pay 75%, and the owner of the victim should lose 25%. Udkokashilach, balabor, mishalim palga. And if you're going to say, like I just said, that the owner of the pit should pay half, uvalashor mishalim revia, and the owner of the ox should pay a quarter. The idach riva, and the remaining quarter nafsid, the owner of the victim should lose. Mishum do omarle, well, because the owner of the victim ox is not going to go down so easily. Mishum do omarle balashor levalabor, that the owner of the victim ox says to the owner of the pit, look, pit boy, ana toiroi beverach ashkechose. Look, I don't care what you want to say. My dead ox was found in your pit. At kotalte. You killed my ox. My deisli de lishtalume me'aich mishtalamna. Whatever I can collect from the other ox owner, I'll collect, which is 25%. And sure, you don't need to pay me that 25%. But my delesli lishtalume me'aich mishtalamna mimcha. But whatever I cannot collect from the owner of the ox, I'm going to be collecting from you. And I believe that this is where the tie-in, I believe that this is where the tie-in is to our Mishnah. I don't think it's from the first part. Let me just think for a second. I don't think it's from the first part. 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 No, I think it's from this part. That Be'etzim Reb Nosson is saying that the owner of the victim ox, he's just going to chase after his damage payments wherever he needs to go. And if he can't collect from the owner of the ox, he's going to go to the owner of the pit. And here also, the owner, right? So now we have the scenario where you have the worker in the pit. The worker is drilling. The ox gets startled, falls into the pit. Now, the owner of the ox can't go after the worker because that was just a grumma. The worker was drilling and caused the ox to get startled. It fell into the pit. It's a grumma. So you can't go after the worker. But the owner of the ox says, okay, well, if I can't go after the worker, I'm going to go after the owner of the pit. And he says, look, at the end of the day, my dead ox is in your pit. You're going to pay me. And that is why the Baal HaBor is going to be Chayiv. Amar Rava, says Rava, Hiniach Even Al Pi HaBor. If a person put a stone right at the opening of a pit, Uvashor v'niskalba v'nofel bebor, and then an ox comes and trips on the stone and then falls into the pit, Banu the machlokas Reb Nosson v'Rabbanon. So we have arrived at our machlokas between Reb Nosson and the Rabbanon regarding right. The rabbis would say that the owner of the person who put the stone there is chayav. The person, right, the balabor, is going to be potter, whereas the Reb Nosson would say that they be'etzim split it. Okay, so pshita is obvious. Ma'odetema, well, I may have thought hasam hu d'amar balabor levalashor ilav beredidi toradidach havakatule. So the easiest way I think to understand this is according to the rabbis, explaining the rabbis that, well, I may have thought that in the initial scenario, when one ox pushes another ox into a pit, the reason why the Baal HaBor does not need to pay anything according to the rabbis is because, let's read that again. Hasamu da'amar Baal HaBor leval hashor. Over there, the owner of the pit could say to the owner of the damaging ox, Ilab be'eredidi, if not for my pit, even without my pit didn't exist, still, Torah didach havakotile, your ox did enough damage that it would have killed the other ox without my pit contributing anything. Therefore, I don't need to pay anything. Aval hacha, but over here, where the ox trips on a stone in Rishus Rabbim and then falls into the pit, Matzi Amarle, Baal Even, the Baal HaBor, but over here, the owner of the stone could respond to the owner of the pit, Ilav be'er didach, if not for your pit, Avna didi, Mayava Avda, my stone wouldn't have really caused that much damage. Yav a miskalba, have a nafel v'koi. If it fell down, if it tripped on the stone, it would have just, if not for your pit, it would have just fallen on the ground and not gotten killed. Kamash Malon, right? So therefore the Baal Even is trying to blame the Baal HaBor. So Kamash Malon, Dormale Ilav Even, Lo Yav Nafel Leveira. But still, the Baal HaBor could say, look, at the end of the day, if not for your silly stone that you put right by my pit, well then, we wouldn't have been in this scenario, and therefore the Rabbanan still maintain that the Baal HaBor is not going to have to contribute. Alright, this next little chunk, 5-10 lines or something, I'm not 100%, I get it out of Sof, but let's see what happens. Itmar, it was stated, Shor v'shor psulei amukdoshin shenogchu. Okay, so if you have an ox, okay, and an ox that is psulei amukdoshin, an ox that is, let's say, an animal that was going to be a korban, then it got a mum, then it got redeemed. So both oxen gored another ox, and I guess killed the other ox. So you have these two oxen that are contributing to the death of the other ox. One of them is just a regular ox, so the owner of that ox is going to be chai, but the other one is shor psulei amukdoshin, which is going to be potter. So Abaye Omar says Mishalim Chatzi Nezek. So Abaye says that the owner of the ox pays Chatzi Nezek. Okay. Ravina Omar Mishalim Rivia Nezek. Whereas Ravina says that the owner of the non-psulei amukdoshin ox, the regular ox, pays 25% damages. Havahabitam, and we want to say that both are talking about a shor tam. That Abaye is saying that a shor tam is going to pay 50% damages, and Ravina is going to say that a shor tam pays a quarter damages. Hakirabonon v'Rab Nosson, and we're saying that Abaye is saying like Reb Nosson, that I guess would be like the first opinion of Reb Nosson, that each contributed to 100% of the damages, and therefore the shor tam is paying 50%. Now we had said in the Gemara that maybe you can make a deal can make an argument with the Baal HaShor and say, well, no, I'm not getting any benefit from this partnership. I guess he's not saying that, and therefore he's responsible for 50% of the damages, whereas we're saying that, at least Rashi explains that Ravina is like the rabbis, that I guess that there are two partners here. The Psulei Mukdashin obviously is not paying for his half, and in terms of the half of the Baal HaShor, was a short tam, so he's only going to pay 50%. Okay, I hope I got that right. Alternatively, or both of them are like the rabbis, habatam habamud. That if it's a short tam, so the Baal HaShor pays 50% of the damages, and the Psulei Mukdashin pays the other 50%, but he's not paying, so it's 50%. And if it's a short tam, so then it's the same thing, just it's going to be so no damages from the Psulei Mukdashin, but half damages from the other shore. Okay. Those who say Abaye Omer Chatzi Nezek, Ravina Omer Kuli Nezek. Alternatively, those who say Abaye says that there's going to be half damages, Ravina says full damages. Hava HaBemuad, and we can say that both of them are talking about a shor muad, Hakir Abonin, Vakir Abnosin. and it's like Rabbanan Reb Nosson. That I guess Ravina would be like the Rabbanan. No, Abaye would be, I believe, like the Rabbanan. That there's two partners, so the shore would pay 100% of his half, and Ravina would be like Reb Nosson, that each contributed to 100% of the damages. Now the Psulei Mukdashim is not going to contribute anything, so therefore the Baal HaShor needs to contribute all of it. Okay, wait, let me just make sure. Let me see something. Wait, is there? What? Oh, come on. Yeah, okay. Is there no Rashi on this? Okay, hopefully that's right. Alternatively, they're both like Reb Nosson, and yeah, I think that what I said was correct. And if it's a shormua, then there's going to be entire damages, and if it's a shortam, it's going to be 50% damages. I hope I got that right. It was kind of weird. All right, let's wrap up over here. It shouldn't be hard for the rest. Amar Rava says, Rava, shor v'adam shedachafu lebor. So that's interesting. Here we have three factors. You have an ox, and you have a person who are pushing an ox into a pit. So you have shor, you have adam, you have bor. So you have three contributing factors. So in nizakin kulon chayavin. So in terms of damages, all three are chayav, right? Shor, bor, adam, they're all going to be chayav. Now we get to sort of specialty payments. The inyan arba devarim, when it comes to tsar, sheves, boshes, ripoy, so udmei vladis, and when it comes to miscarriaging, adam chayav v'shor v'or p'turin. So only adam is chayav for those payments, and I guess that wouldn't be talking about pushing a ox into a pit, because we're talking about Abadvamis by people as well as Vladis. Okay. Linyan Kofer, Vishloshim Shel Eved. Now when it comes to Kofer payments in the 30 shekels for an Eved, so then that's specifically by a Shormuot, Chayiv, the Adam Uvor Pturim, but not Adam Uvor. Linyan Kalim, if it comes to vessels, well that's a scenario. And Shor Psulei HaMukdashim, or if a Shor Psulei HaMukdashim, Adam V'Shor Chayavin, Uvor potter, right? So let's just talk about the bor for a second. So bor is potter, right? If vessels fall into a bor, at least according to the Chachamim, right? It says shor v'lo adam, chomer v'lo kelim, right? So if vessels fall into a bor, the owner of the bor is potter. Okay, and also, I believe we learned about this already, but we're going to learn about it again over here, that if an ox that is psulei hamukdashin falls into a pit, also the owner of the pit is potter. But that doesn't apply to Adam v'kelim, to Adam v'shor. They would be chayiv by vessels, and if they attack a psulei mukdashin. My time, how come shor psulei mukdashin is potter when it comes to bor? Because the pasuk says v'ameis yeh lo. That it says in the context of the pit, it says balabor yishalim kesev yashal v'alev v'ameis yeh lo, that the carcass needs to belong to him, I guess, to the Baal HaShor. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? The point is that a shor psulei hamukdashim, all you could do, right, if you have an ox that is going to be offered as a korban, but then it gets a mum, so you can't offer it as a korban. So you could redeem it, and then you can eat it, but you can't feed it to your dogs. You can't do work with it. The only thing you can do is you can eat it. So now, if it falls into the pit, there's basically nothing you can do with it. So v'ameisi elo. So the carcass, whether it's the Baal HaBor, whether it's the Baal HaShor, there's nothing you can't do it. You can't eat it because it's nevela and you can't feed it to the dogs. So therefore, it says v'ameisi elo, the carcass will belong to him. B'misha ameis shelo. So we're talking about a scenario where the ox actually does belong to him, such as a regular ox that falls in the pit and dies, so you can feed it to your dogs. Yotzazet, to the exclusion of psulei mukdashim she'ein ameis shelo, that it doesn't belong to him because he can't do anything with it. Betzim. Lemeimra the pshita le'derava. So this sounds like it's that Rava is decided that a shor psulei mukdashim that falls into a pit, potter, as if it's clear to him that this is the halacha. But I thought he wasn't clear. I thought he asked the question. Rava asked. Rava asked, shor psulei hamukdashin shenaf lebor mahu. What happens if a shor psuli hamukdashim falls into a pit. Hai v'amesi elo b'misha ames shelo yotzezeh shein ames shelo. Do we learn out from the pasuk of v'amesi elo that it's to the exclusion of shor psuli hamukdashim? O dilma, or perhaps v'amesi elo levayla mitapim b'nevela uda also. Or maybe v'amesi elo is like we had learned ages ago, that the owner of the ox is responsible for the carcass, right? Meaning that the owner of the ox that is dead keeps the carcass and he sells it, and that contributes, or we subtract the value of the carcass from the value of that the damager is chayiv to pay. That we learn from Meisi Elo. It belongs to the the damaged party. So it's to the bayo the pashta. So you're right. Initially, Rava had a question. He wasn't sure what we learn out from Vamesi Elo, but then he answered it, and he said, you know what? It means that it's coming to the exclusion of Shor Psuli HaMukdashim by Bor. So then how does Rava know this concept of Bailam Metaplim B'Nevela by Bor? So Nafkalei min Vamesi Elo to Shor. Well, it also says Vamesi Elo by Shor, right? If an ox scores another ox. So just like over there we say that the victim takes the carcass, so you're also by a pit that the victim takes the carcass. My chazos de v'amesi elo de shor mafkas le levalim tabim b'nevela v'amesi elo de bor mafkas le lemishames shelo. Now, Rava, how did you know that v'amesi elo by shor is talking about that the owner of the victim takes the carcass, and that v'amesi elo by bor is saying that psuli mukdashin is potter? Maybe it's the other way around. So ipuchana, let me switch it around. So we say, no, don't switch anything around. Mistavra, potter, gabe, bor. It makes sense that psuli mukdashim are potter specifically by bor, holu fater bo es hakelim. Because by bor, kelim are potter, so it makes sense. You know what else is potter? Psuli mukdashim. Adrab, I'll say punkt fakert. Potter, gabe, shor. That psuli mukdashim are potter by shor, shekin potter bo chatzi nezek. Because by shor, there's a concept of just sort of signing off on half of the damages. By a short time, he's not responsible for half of the damages. So kule nezek mias lo ashkachan. We say eno chinami. Yeah, there is the concept of chatzi nezek by shor, but there's no concept of wiping away all of the nezek. So because there is, so therefore it's not significant enough. But by bor, it's mamish potter when it comes to kelim, and also you'll be potter when it comes to psuli mukdashim. Friends, that was daf nun gimel of Masechta BavaKama. We talked about a bunch of stuff. We talked about a shor falling into a pit because of somebody doing work in the pit. We saw Mechlokas Rav and Shmuel. The Rav would say that he's chayiv if it falls face first, but not caboose first. Shmuel would say regardless is going to be chayiv because it's about getting a bump. Then we talked about, but why is anybody chayiv? Because it's groma. So we say, well, it's like Rav Nosson who says that even though the Baal Shor can't go after the worker, he's going to go after the owner of the pit. He's going to go after whoever he needs to in order to get his payment. Friends, that was daf nun gimel Masechta BavaKama. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.